Are you looking for a new city in 2023? If you are, like I said in the state version of this series, you're not alone. 2023 is predicted to be one of the most active years for relocation on record. In this video, I'm going to tell you which cities you should probably avoid. As we slowly come out of the pandemic, a lot of cities have started to turn things around. Every city, large and small, took a real hit over the last few years because of the pandemic. Some, in my opinion, have set themselves up for success post-COVID. Others, not so much. Some of these cities are dealing with old problems that have gotten worse while picking up some new ones. And those are the cities we're looking at, the ones that will be getting worse in 2023. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to say, what about this city? What about this city? And like San Francisco or Chicago. I think a lot of cases, some of those have already hit rock bottom and they can really only go up. This isn't the worst city list. This is cities I think will be getting worse. Keep that in mind. But this video is my opinion based on information that I've been taking in over the last year. Are these cities 100% horrible? No. Will they struggle in the next year and probably beyond? I think so. If you think I listed a city that shouldn't be on this list, I'd love to hear about it in the comments section below. These are just my opinion and why. Unless you're just a troll, I'm sure you have some valid opinions. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Houston, Texas. Of all the major cities in Texas, Houston's the one that's like nobody wants to move to. Now, people are moving there, so don't quote me on it, but it's just not as popular as the other ones. And for good reason. Houston kind of blows. Over the last 6 years, Houston's crime rate has continued to grow. Their schools don't get the best marks, and their poverty level in Houston is 45% higher than the national average. I'd give you their exact unemployment rate, but it changes so often, it's just safe to say that it's between 8 and 10% higher than the national average most months. There's a lot of cool things to do and see in Houston, don't get me wrong. It's just these days the crime rate and some of their other stats are just keeping people away and driving people out. And it's too bad. Texas has a lot of places that are doing good and getting better. Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, San Antonio area, Austin's one of the most popular places to move to right now. El Paso's pretty good. I'd move to Amarillo before I'd move to Houston. And not because I'm a dirt field enthusiast either. They ranked 150 of the largest cities in the United States on different categories, and one stuck out to me about Houston was their quality of city services. Out of 150 cities, they're ranked 126th. Number 9, Philadelphia. There's a lot of pros when it comes to Philadelphia. It's just got a lot more cons these days. Speaking of cons, their crime rate's growing too. I mean, it's a major city and you can't expect it to have perfect crime or below average crime. That's just how big cities are. But their violent crime rate has been growing the last few years. It's actually right now 134% higher than the national average. Is that the worst in the United States? No. Is it pretty scary? Yes. If you want to see something that is alarming, YouTube or Google Kensington, and it's a neighborhood in Philadelphia that is just filled with homeless and drug addicts. It is so bad, there are third world slums that look better than Kensington. Remember that service stat I just talked about for Houston? They're actually worse than Houston. They're ranked 129th in the nation. Now, there are some wonderful areas of Philadelphia. Don't get me wrong. I mean, every city has these. I mean, except for the one that's right across the river from Philadelphia, Camden, New Jersey. Yeah, that place is bad all the way around. And I think that helps bring down some of Philadelphia's stats. Number 8, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville's one of those places you never really hear about unless you're an NFL fan, or if you live in Florida. I haven't visited Jacksonville probably in about 5 or 6 years, but I've been there like 3 or 4 times, and I've been very underwhelmed each time. The only thing I really did like about Jacksonville was the downtown area by the St. Johns River. The whole waterfront area, that's pretty nice. But you get into some of the neighborhoods, it's not worth your time. Jacksonville's crime rate has been climbing at a pretty good pace. In some of the suburbs and neighborhoods, it's been climbing pretty bad. Now, what really gets them on this list besides the crime is their employment. Their employment numbers haven't looked good and they don't have a lot of really good paying jobs on average. Their income per capita is about 20% lower than the national average. And their poverty rate is almost 15% higher than the national average. From what I've seen, they just haven't rebounded as well as other places in Florida after the pandemic. Granted, the pandemic's not entirely gone, but we're on the downside of it. At least we hope, right? Yeah, so in 2023, if you're going to be moving to Florida, there's better places to choose than Jacksonville. Number 7, Riverside, California. Riverside is like in the armpit of California, but to be fair, California has several armpits. This is one of about 12. Riverside is southeast of downtown Los Angeles, and it's kind of where Los Angeles sends all its smog. It's hot, it's miserable, it has a lot of potential, it's just not living up to it. The prices, though, when it comes to housing and cost of living, they act like they're living up to their potential, and they're really not. The cost of living in Riverside is about 25% higher than the national average, and housing is about 50% higher than the national average. Now, for California, that doesn't really sound like it's a bad thing, but Riverside's out in the middle of the frickin' desert. Almost. Their schools get rated a big F, as does their crime. Their crime is not good. Their violent crime's about 20% higher than the national average, and their property crime's about 55% higher. That kind of goes with people not having really good jobs and a high cost of living. They start stealing your junk. Now, I grew up in Southern California near the beach, and I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to this part of California. It kind of sucks. And I see it just going downhill all of 2023 and maybe 2024. Number 6, South Bend, Indiana. You ever hear of South Bend? If you're a college football fan or you live in northern Indiana, I'm sure you have. It's where Notre Dame is. It also has the St. Joseph River flowing right through town. It is sandwiched between Gary, Indiana, Toledo, Ohio, Detroit, Michigan, and Chicago. It's like kind of in the middle there, a little closer to Gary and Chicago. So it only makes sense this place is gonna blow. It wasn't always that way. This was a major industrial manufacturing area back in the early 20th century, even to the mid 20th century. Because of the St. Joseph River, Studebaker, the old car manufacturer, they set up shop there. It still has some remaining large corporations that are based in the area, including Crow, Honeywell, and AM General. You know what else they got? A lot of violent crime, and for some reason these people like to use knives. They have a strange amount of knife attacks in this city. The violent crime rate in South Bend, Indiana is actually 346% above the national average. So it is one of the most unsafe metro areas in the United States, and nobody ever really hears about it. Their crime rate continues to grow, poverty continues to get worse, and according to Area Vibes, their schools get a giant F. The good thing is, they got a lot of things to do and their cost of living is pretty low. Housing, not so much. I mean, you can find a lot of cheap houses here. It's just, do you really want these houses? Look at this purple gem they got for sale in South Bend right now. It's going for $125,000. It looks like Barbie's substance abuse house. Now, is that purple or is that more of a mauve? Anyway, as long as you're selling houses like this and you have a crime rate that high, this place is going to continue to go downhill. Number 5, Hartford, Connecticut. If you don't know much about the East Coast and New England in general, you're probably just by reputation going to think that Hartford, Connecticut is a nice place. I mean, it's in New England. New England is one of the safest regions in the nation. They have 3 of the absolute safest states we have: Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. They're 1, 2, and 3 every single year. Connecticut also has some of the richest neighborhoods and towns in the country. Some of the wealthiest people we have living in the United States are in Connecticut. Not many of them live in Hartford, Connecticut. Hartford, Connecticut is kind of a nightmare. The good news, it's one of the least expensive places to live in New England as far as cities go. The downside is you're taking your life into your own hands. Their violent crime rate is 156% above the national average, and that's up from 120% above the national average in 2019. 2017, it was only 65% above the national average. It's going in the wrong direction. The unemployment is always high. Right now, it sits about 130% above the national average. That fluctuates. Next month it could be 110. 3 months from now it could be 90%, but you get the idea. Their poverty rate is also 111% above the national average. This is a major city, at least by New England standards. The town itself only has about 121,000 residents, but the metro area has a little over 1.2 million. I couldn't find any of their major stats that have gotten better over the last 5 years. There's no sign of the suckage to stop anytime soon. Number 4, Memphis, Tennessee. Easily one of the worst cities we have going on right now in the United States. It is catching up with Detroit, and I think at some point it's going to pass East St. Louis as one of the worst cities in the United States. Just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, their crime rate is 237% above the national average. Their violent crime rate is 506% above the national average. There are Mad Max movies with less violence than this city, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. It's just going to continue to go downhill for some time till they get a handle on their crime. That's the biggest problem here. Well, that and their income per capita, household income, unemployment rate, their schools. The only thing that gets high marks in Memphis is their cost of living. It's pretty cheap to live here. As we all know, a cost of living is a good indicator on how popular the city is. If it's cheap, nobody wants to live there. If it's expensive, everyone wants to live there. Number 3, Little Rock, Arkansas. In 1994, there was a documentary, which I thought was a mockumentary, that came out called Bangin' in Little Rock, and it showed how gang members were in Little Rock and the crime and the violence and the drugs and all that good stuff. It hasn't got much better. Their crime rate is 186% higher than the national average. Violent crime rate is 377% above the national average. They got serious poverty issues, infrastructure issues, but they do have one really cool thing. Their schools are rated very well, oddly enough. They get graded a B-, and their cost of living's not terrible. But when you got stats like they do, you'd expect the cost of living to be a little bit better than it is. It's 4% lower than the national average, but when you're living in that kind of crime and the housing sucks and the poverty's everywhere, you expect the cost of living to be, there's a trade-off, you know? You want it to be lower. You're just not getting it here. And nothing's gonna change here in 2023, I promise you. Number 2, Jackson, Mississippi. So Jackson normally kind of sucks, but just recently they had some severe flooding. People have gone without power and water. The flooding kind of went down a week ago, and as of yesterday, the water was restored, but it was still undrinkable. There are only 3 types of people living in Jackson, Mississippi. People that were transferred there from their work, they have family there, or they're on parole and they can't leave. Jackson, Mississippi is often brought up as the worst capital city in the United States. In case you didn't know, Jackson is the capital of the Magnolia State. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There is a link down below. We'd love it if you went over there and subscribed. Also subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Stockton, California. Not many people hear about Stockton, California, unless maybe you're a UFC fan. 2 of their biggest stars are from Stockton. Ex-stars, I should say. I don't think they're fighting for them anymore. Stockton is east of San Francisco and Oakland, but north of Modesto. This whole part of the Central Valley of California is where hopes and dreams go to die. It is surrounded by farmland, and if those farms weren't there, they'd be surrounded by desert. Stockton gets poor grades for their schools, their unemployment's pretty high, their crime rate's pretty high. Total crime rate's 82% above the national average, and violent crime rate is 229% above the national average. This whole part of California is just kind of another part that's failing. Is it failing as bad as, let's say, San Francisco? You know, I don't think so. But I think San Francisco's hit rock bottom, so they're not going to be getting worse in the coming years. They can only get better. Stockton, on the other hand, has a way to go till they get to the bottom, and I think the bottom's gonna come in 23, 24, or 2025. And that's why they're number 1 on this list. All right, that's today's list. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.